Hi, so for this project I had Chapter 9, Activity 9.7. The activity was called Snack Time Sharing, and this activity includes concepts for both multiplication and division. So for the first little activity for review, we're just going to review some simple multiplication. So there's a little bit of a word problem here. It says the cookie pan has 3 rows of cookies. Each row has 4 cookies in it. How many cookies are there? So we have a little bit of a graphic here to help us picture the cookies. So we have 3 rows of cookies, and then each row has 4 cookies in it. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. So what would our equation look like? So first I would have the students kind of collaborate and talk about what they think the equation would look like based on the 3 rows of cookies and then having 4 in each row. So then after we came back together, after some discussion, we would talk about how the equation could be 3 times 4 or even 4 times 3. And then we would talk about the answer and how we got 12 after a little bit of discussion, and then making that connection. So if 4 times 3 is 12, how many cookies are on the pan and how that is still 12. And then we would jump into some division aspects. So here's another word problem. If we still have our 12 cookies on the pan and we wanted to share them equally with 4 people, how many cookies would each person have? So we have our 12 cookies again with 3 rows and 4 in each row. So then we continue with some more aspects. So we would talk about how we still have 12 cookies, we know, and then kind of talking about what we know. So we have 4 friends, and we know we have 4 rows, and then it kind of switched. So we have 4 rows and then 3 cookies in each row. So it would be 4 times 3, which equals 12 still again. So we are all still dealing with 12 in the multiplication to get 12 and the other aspects we know. So we would kind of talk about that in groups, and so I would have them think about that again and kind of make that connection, how it's still the same, because we still know those aspects of the problem. And then we would jump more into the division part of it. So we would talk about so if we have 12 cookies and we divide it up for 4 people, how many cookies would each person get? So then we would go into more discussion and talk about kind of that language, and so that way they are kind of reminded of what actually they would be talking about if they said 12 divided by 4 equals whichever number they thought it would be, and hopefully making that connection of substituting numbers so we could just easily drag 3 into this place. So then we would talk about that more, and then talk about how there were 3 cookies for each person. Alright, so then it would jump into like the main activity of snack time sharing. And so if this was actually in person, I would probably do more of a hands-on activity where students would be at tables and I would hand them a bag of cookies. So it talked about in the chapter kind of making sure that we have maybe 4 groups and making sure each bag of cookies has a different amount. So if we had 4 students in a group, if we gave them 16 cookies, but then if we also had another group of 4 and we gave them only 15, and so then it would be an odd number so that they would have to think more about that. And then having like another group, so having their bag or the group maybe have 5 people and have like 15 in one and then 16 in one, and see how they would go about problem solving too with that extra cookie. So for this first one though, online, before we jumped into one that was not even, we would talk about one that would evenly be distributed. So we would, as a class online, we would look at, so what if the number of cookies changes? So we don't want them to like get caught up on the number 12 and that there's only 12 always on the pan of cookies. So what if we have 16 cookies now? So then we have the visual of 16 cookies, and if 4 friends were sharing the cookies, how would they share them fairly? So we would talk about how we have to evenly distribute these cookies between 4 people. So how many cookies would each of those people have in the end? So we talk how many cookies would each person get. So 4 times what, we would talk about what was missing. 4 times what equals 16, and kind of making that connection. And then once we broke off and kind of talked about that more, having students problem solve, raise their hands, talk about different things like that, we would figure out that 4 times 4 equals 16. And then hopefully use that to connect to, if we jumped into 16 cookies divided up for 4 people, how many cookies would they each have? So hopefully they would then get that concept that we're just kind of flipping around the numbers. So what number was missing? If we have 2 4s and a 16, then we would know that we could just plug that 4 in there, and that 16 divided by 4 is 4. And they wouldn't have to have like pieces and evenly put them out. They could do that easier just by looking at it. So then I have just another slide for those people that do need to visually look at it if they aren't understanding it, that we have 4 friends up top here, and that each of them has 4 cookies under them, representing that they each have 4 cookies to eat in the end. If there were 16 cookies, 4 friends, we would divide the cookies up so each person got 4. So, as I talked about earlier, we would have the opportunity to have a not even number, so that way we could have students kind of problem solve. So, what if this time, students, the number of kids changes? So if we still have 16 cookies, but now we have 5 kids to share the cookies, how many would each person get? So we have another friend joining our 4 friends, and so they also we need to put the cookies all back together and make sure that we share them evenly with our 5th friend. So then we would kind of talk about how we should go about this first. So last time we talked about how 4 times what equals 16. So can we multiply any number by 5 to get 16? And we would talk about maybe problem solving and figuring that out if we could do that, and then talk about how we can't do that. So how close can we get to 16 if we can't exactly get 16? So 5 times what would get us to closest to 16? So then we figured out, after that we would talk more and figure out the closest we can get to 16, multiplying numbers by 5 would be 15, because that was only one number away from 16, so we can't get any closer. So then we would talk about again and go problem solve again and figure out which number times 5 would give us 15, and we would figure out that that was 3. So if 5 times 3 is 15, we would connect that each person gets 3 cookies. So if we do 16 minus 15, we have 1 cookie left over. So if we have 1 cookie left over and we have 5 friends, we can't give the other kids 1 more cookie, because that wouldn't be fair. Only 1 of the 5 would get an extra cookie. And then we can't do that if not all of them can have 1 more cookie. So then the friends must decide what is the fair thing to do with the last cookie. So that would be something for the friends to decide. Maybe they would all decide to give it to maybe someone's mom if they were at someone's house, or their teacher. They could decide what they wanted to do to make it fair. Maybe they decide that someone had a smaller cookie or something from the batch, and so they decided to give them the last cookie because they had to have one of the small cookies. Or they could just we could have the students talk and problem solve and figure out what they would decide as a group if there was an extra cookie in their bag, what they would like to do with that cookie. So then we can kind of connect this activity at home if this was online, and so that way they can apply this lesson again and bring it home to their family. So there are ways to apply this lesson at home. We could have them bake cookies with their family or share a snack with their family. And so if they were to bake a batch of cookies, they could then separate the cookies evenly based on the number of people in their house. So if they made a batch of 12 cookies and they had 4 people in their house, then we would already be able to connect, oh, we talked about that problem earlier. 12 divided by 4 would be 3 cookies each, or 4 cookies each, depending on it, if they had 3 people, if we had 12 cookies. And then they would be able to figure out if they had 5 people in their house, or maybe they only had 3, maybe they only have 2. They can figure out based on their special batch of cookies that they made, and then the number of their family and how many cookies each person would get. And then they could even bring those numbers back to school if they wanted, based on just kind of whatever the plan would be. If they were in person at all, or the next meeting online, they could also discuss that in groups. And then they could talk about what are other ways at home, or when dividing, like what are other ways to practice division? What do we have to divide in our everyday lives, like sharing a batch of cookies or sharing a basket of fries, different things like that. And we could talk about how we use different things and how different ways they come up with to use division. And then here are the Common Core standards that were included in this lesson plan in the book. And yeah, that's it.